And there's a huge potential for this to be achieved in Nigeria. I want to just quickly give some international approaches below. So in Britain, we have something called the community rail, which is a concept that was initially developed by grassroots organizations before being adopted as a government strategy. So it's a program that engages local people in the development and promotion of rural routes, services, and stations. As you can see, it's worth anything up to actually 27.6 million in social value to the community of rural volunteers themselves, and it's helped transform several rural communities in Great Britain through the development of new event centers, improving redundant building, basically transit-oriented development within rural areas, which has created a regeneration among the communities there. And there's huge potential for this to be also emulated in Nigeria, I believe. We also have in South Africa the Felefepa healthcare trains. And these are actually mobile health clinics that are owned and operated by Transit Foundation. These trains actually run 36 weeks a year and travel up to 70 remote communities annually. So we're talking in a country right now that has, I think, only one doctor per 5,000 people in South Africa. And this ability to integrate healthcare with rail transport has allowed the trains to touch the lives of approximately 14 million people. So this just emphasizes once again the opportunity for rural railway services to actually touch several million Nigerians and really achieve the socio-economic growth that we desire. So these are just quick images of the initiatives I was telling you about. On the left is the mobile health clinic in South Africa. And on the right is a station in rural Great Britain, where this was a dilapidated station. Nothing was here, and a new event space was created that ended up being a hub for the local residents, being used for different type of events, creating economic activity. So I want to quickly focus on and emphasize on the opportunities that exist in rural railway services for Nigeria. The standard gauge route that we have right now actually includes several stations located in rural areas, which provide several opportunities. I'll go on to this later. There's the issue of agri-led industrialization, special agricultural processing zones. So I believe this is an African Development Bank initiative that's also been supported by the federal government. And I think it's important that we start to look at whether any of our special agricultural processing zones are actually near our railway routes and future agricultural processing zones as well. Is there any way for us to integrate this within our railway plans? The Nigerian Railway Master Plan the aim of the master plan is to eventually connect all 36 states across Nigeria by rail. So this provides an excellent opportunity already for us to look at how we can incorporate rural initiatives. As we know, a large majority of Nigeria is still rural farmland. And the final point is RAMP. So RAMP, it stands for the Rural Accessibility Mobility Projects. This is actually a directorate under the Ministry of Agriculture, and it focuses on rural accessibility. It's a World Bank-led project that focuses on specifically roads, road transport, paving of roads, tarring of roads. But have we ever considered the potential of including rail initiatives within rural accessibility within RAMP? Once again, these are just questions to think about, and this within the railway sector in Nigeria, and for all stakeholders listening today, on how we can move Nigeria forward in terms of railway development.
Thank you very much.
Just want to quickly finish off. This is just an example of the railway routes I was telling you about. You can see a lot of Nigeria, the railway routes are still passing through rural areas. And this one, can we go through the challenges? So the challenges we face right now is the planning, lack of coordination between state, local, and federal planning authorities. There's no reference to a rural transport strategy right now. Funding for rail initiatives, yes, they're socioeconomically viable, but are they financially viable, and how do we get around this? and rail affordability for rural dwellers. Yes, in theory, it sounds like a fantastic idea, but the pricing strategy we have, for instance, for someone traveling to Lagos to Ibadan, will be completely different if we want to entice rural dwellers. Can farmers afford the rail fare that we would like to charge, for instance, and so on? So my final thoughts, we need to start taking a more holistic approach to railway planning. Railway is not just about accessibility, babe. Providing accessibility can lead us to improving healthcare, the economy, housing, and several factors. There's a Railway Amendment Act. There's an amendment going on right now, I believe in its second reading, which will allow state governments to be able to plan and execute railway projects. I think this is very crucial as it brings in local knowledge. States and local governments have their own master plan and know how best to use this infrastructure. Rural rail strategy, yes, it's something that we should consider. And how are different railway objectives prioritized? This is a question for the government and stakeholders.
Yeah.
What do we want to
Thank
achieve
you very
via
much.
rail transport? And thank you all for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much. You've spoken about rural rail strategy and what government need to do in terms of leveraging on what has been done so far in the sector to develop and empower the rural community. Professor Andrew from Italy. Professor Andrew.
Yes.
Yeah, now, Nigerian railway sector is public sector driven. Yeah. Now, you have a paper on access and private sector issue. How will it apply to Nigeria? You can present your paper now.
Yes, of course. I will share my presentation right now. So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. And I will share right now my presentation that I hear, and I hope you can see.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Perfect. So
yeah, it's coming.
Great. So thank you very much. So open access competition is a very, very important element that we have to take in consideration. As an adjunct professor in Italy, but I was also former visiting professor at China Academy of Railway Science, and I'm still right now senior rail consultant at the World Bank, also for project in Africa. But my long time experience is coming with a private operator in Italy. And this is Italo NTV, that is the first private high-speed rail company in open access competition. So let me explain how was possible to do that and how we can learn from this experience in other parts of the world. I'm also often professor at the UIC, the International Association of Railways, speaking exactly about the open access competition and how the regulation can go on that. So open access in Italy. Let's explain me this graph. Maybe is a little bit complex, but is important. So in Italy, you have the Ministry of the Economy that is the owner of FSI Holding. FSI Holding is the Ferrovie dello Stato, is the company that manages the railway sector, that is a railway company that is there. And the FSI Holding is managing from a side the infrastructure manager that is named RFI, that is a sort of a network rail. And the other side, you have the railway undertaking that is Trenitalia, that are managing the train going on the infrastructure. But then on the same infrastructure, what is interesting, you have other operators that are private operators, especially for the high-speed rail. You have Italo NTV that is running its own train on the same infrastructure, and you have a private railway undertaking for the freight sector that are running on the same infrastructure. So you have one single infrastructure that is state-owned enterprise that is managed directly by the state-owned enterprise that is controlled by the Ministry of Economy, and then using that infrastructure, paying an access charge for that use, that going from 2 to 8 euro per train kilometers, we can use the same infrastructure to running private train. How to fix the price of access charge is a key element. I made a lot of analysis on that. Is fixed thanks to the help of an independent authority of regulation of transport. I was invited several times also in South Africa, where they're trying to go on this system. Also in other countries all around Europe, we are going to this system, but also in other countries. I will show you. So the access charge is a really key element. So how much I pay as a private company, the use of the infrastructure. And the part is linked to the direct cost of use of that line, that is linked to the what is called wear and tear, so the direct maintenance for that line, and the part is paid for the markup. So it's linked to the ability to pay. So, for example, in Italy, where the demand for the high-speed line for the private passenger is higher, the high-speed rail operator like Italo that is private are paying more than the rail freight where the demand is lower. Then depending on every single country, of course. What is happening in Italy, what we saw that the rail private operator was able to reduce, just for the railway undertaking, to reduce the operational cost around 60, 70%, apart the part of access charge. And the competition is very important because it's a driver of reduction of the cost. I will give you some example. Of course, if you don't solve some problem in terms of corridor, infrastructure, bottleneck, if you don't have a good regulation, good access charge, of course, it's not possible to go for this saving. Sorry for that. What is clear from the high-speed rail in Italy, that right now it's very, very cheap to take the train in Italy. Apart 2020, that is a particular year, unfortunately, as we know very well. But in general, the average price to make 1 kilometer for a passenger, that is called yield, is around 7 cents of euro per train kilometer. That is around 8 cents of US dollar per 1 kilometer. That means that to go from Lagos to Ibadan, for example, is around 10 US dollar on average, if include the economy class, but also the business class and also the other first class, because the train normally in Italy, we have 4 classes, like the aviation business model. Of course, that's happening a lot, the increase of the use of the network, but also what we saw that paying the access charge, so paying the infrastructure, paying the rolling stock with the new rolling stock, we are speaking about 47 new high-speed train, 300 kilometers per hour. The private company, this is just the number for private company, right now, 2019, sorry, they have around 20 million of passengers using that line. And this is just one of operator, because you have the state-owned enterprise that are around 40 million passengers. And the EBITDA margin that is important for a private operator is around 35% positive. So you have an earning before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization that is very positive. What's happening in Italy with the same infrastructure, so we have the same number of kilometers of high-speed line in the last 9 years. So 2012 is when Italo entered in the market. And what we saw during the period 2011-2019, we have an increase of the market around 120% with the same level of GDP, because Italy is not like Nigeria in the last 10 years. Italy, unfortunately, have the same level of GDP in 2011 and 2019. And what has happened that the price of the ticket reduced around 37%. Here you can see also some of my interview that I give to Bloomberg or Reuters about this business model in Italy. One element that is important that you can have a modal shift. That means that right now, the train, the high-speed train is really competitive with also the low-cost carrier, also with other airlines that are low-cost like Ryanair, EasyJet, Vueling, and so on. And what is important in the operational cost to reduce the cost for available seat kilometers, you can see the CASK here, that is the cost for available seat kilometer. So how much is the cost for running one seat for 1 kilometer on board of the train? We reduce the cost thanks to the maintenance contract. So you change completely how you make the maintenance contract, the optimization of the space on board, the running cost is reduced, the IT cost is reduced. So all these kind of things is very important. But the other side, you have to increase the revenue. So you have a revenue management like the aviation business model that is very important. Integration with other services. The high-speed line, for example, is not alone. They create also a service with the Italo Bus that is a sort of integration in the hub with the buses plus the high-speed train. One single ticket to go from a city that have not high-speed rail, but is connected with the bus and then with the high-speed rail to arrive to the main city like Rome or Milan. Then the productivity of the rolling stock, ancillary revenues, increase of the quality. For example, it's normal to have not only the free Wi-Fi on board, but on board portal, you can watch movies on board. So it's very similar to the intercontinental flight that you can normally use. The last few points, so I will not take too much minutes on that. Also in the rail freight is important the competition that we introduce. Right now, the new operator, rail freight private operator, they have around 50% of the market and around 70% of the international market that is richest. What is important, and wanted to underline this in terms of also not only in terms of regulation, is to see the logistic as a system. I work with many logistic operator, of course, and what we can see that is very important to be able to connect with a good rail connectivity, the ports, and with that you can use the rail as a backbone to go to other place where then you can have also road intermodality, so a sort of dry ports. This is very important to reduce the cost of the logistic. And this is the intermodality is very, very important if you have a good use of the railway operator. So it's a key element to increase the productivity of a country. So and also for international transport, of course, is very important. And on that rail backbone, with a good regulation, you are able to attract new private operator that will take new part of the demand, maybe from the road, or maybe what we saw, they take a new part of the demand that before was not using the train or was not traveling. So this is very important to be able to be very efficient on that. The last point, and I finish here. I don't want to tell you that there's just the Italian example. I work in China, South Korea, Japan, Middle East, America, US, and so on. So the Italian model is used right now in the high-speed rail in Europe, but you can have also different business model, like the private vertical integrated model like in Japan, or the Chinese operation. When I go as a professor at the China Academy of Railway Science, that is the biggest academy in the world about railway, they try to understand how it's possible to reduce the cost of operation. And then you have an example of South Korea that you have a competition, but also in other markets you are seeing that are opening with the open access, with the good use of attracting the private operator on the same line. So even if we have a state-owned enterprise, it's possible, we are making the same in Tanzania, for example, it's possible to try to attract with a good regulation, to attract private operator that increase the use of the network and increase the use of the rail, because this is very important to increase the productivity, increase the competitivity of a country. With that, I want really thank you for giving me this opportunity to present this case, and I'm here for any discussion that we will have.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew. Prof, thank you very much. You have given us an example of Italy, how private sector train system is run and managed, and what Nigeria can learn from it. We've spoken about issue of competition, access charges, multimodality, and market competition. Thank you very much. We'll come to discussions. And Mr. President, I want to call on Mr. Hussein Askari. China has been very deeply involved in Nigerian railway development. Now, Mr. Askari belongs to the worldwide network of road and bed initiatives. And I want him to, in his paper, he will speak about China railway development, debt trap, and all those fears people are entertaining. Mr. Askari.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. Rotimi Amechi, Minister of Transportation of Nigeria, Mr. Chairman Olawale Rashid, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to be invited to speak in this webinar on railway development in Nigeria. My name is Hussein Askari, and I am a board member of the Belt and Road Institute in Sweden. I have also worked many years as an economic and strategic analyst in the International Schiller Institute with special focus on the impact of regional and transcontinental infrastructure integration on economic development. I would like to share my presentation with you.
Slide. Okay.
Okay, is it coming up?
Yes.
Okay, let me see if I can do a slideshow.
Yeah, it's on. It's on here.
Yeah, okay, I just want to do a slideshow and let me. Sorry, just to make a start a slideshow. I'd have this panel in front of me. I can't remove it.
Oh, okay.
Wait, what's in?
Okay.
Anyway, if this is enough for you, I can continue.
Yes, you can continue.
Okay. So we have focused for many years on the question of the new Silk Road, which later evolved into the Belt and Road Initiative. I am the co-author of this book called Extending the New Silk Road to West Asia and Africa, and how to integrate these two regions into the Belt and Road Initiative. Therefore, my focus today is on the continent of Africa as a whole, not simply only on Nigeria. As for Nigeria, I can only say that I have watched this with gratitude, what has been presented and will be presented, because I also need to learn more about Nigeria. The Belt and Road Initiative, which was announced by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013, is becoming the largest economic endeavor in history. It's already shaping many aspects of the world economy so far, and 136 nations have joined the initiative, including 46 African nations. Now, why is this important for Africa? It's a well-known fact that the railway system built by the colonial powers in Africa had one and only one purpose, that is to extract wealth from Africa to the world markets. Not only are the different nations not connected together, but the railways are of different gauge systems. So here we can see the difference between the colonial system and what we envision for the future of Africa's rail. This condition, or the colonial condition, and the lack of efficient intra-African transport networks created a situation after independence up to this day where the different African nations trade with the outside world is far greater than among neighboring African nations themselves. So Africa's trade with African nations is only 13% of its total trade. For example, when I looked at it in 2014, Sudan's trade with Egypt, which is a neighboring country, was only 1.5% of the two countries' trade with the rest of the world. So this is not a very good situation. A World Bank study conducted in 2006 projected that if the roads networks among African nations were to be upgraded, that's the existing roads, only if you upgrade these, you will have a growth of trade in these nations for between 250% and 1,000%, especially in the sub-Saharan landlocked nations. The new Africa Free Trade Agreement is, of course, a huge step forward, but you cannot have trade without trade routes. So if we look at the next slide, this is a map issued by the World Food Programme showing the level of hunger in the world. Now, that's the number of people who don't get enough food to eat. So the dark numbers are 40% and above. You have the gray countries like South Sudan and the Congo here. They are not represented, but because there are no statistics, but they are in the deep purple color. So what you see here is that the most affected countries, what is common among them is that they are all landlocked. They have no access to international trade ports, and they are also not connected efficiently to their neighbors. So only if you upgrade, as we said, the existing roads and build them better, you will increase the trade. Now, what happens if we have much greater railway integration? So why is, if we move to the positive side of things, is that, this is from the 2018 Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, the FOCAC. And almost all African leaders were in Beijing. 2 weeks later, less than half of the African leaders went to the United Nations General Assembly, which shows their interest. Now, why is China interesting for Africa? Now, in President Xi Jinping's visit to South Africa and the FOCAC summit in 2015, he said a number of very interesting things, including the fact that China, as a developing and poor nation, managed in 3 decades to leapfrog the industrial nations who took like 200 years of development. And he said this is completely possible to do in Africa. However, he identified 3 bottlenecks of development, which is very important to think about. And the first one is the shortage of capital, and that's for Africa, but China is speaking from its own experience. The shortage of skilled labor and the lack of infrastructure. Concerning the first one, on the shortage of capital, China is contributing large sums of both loans, but also foreign direct investment into African infrastructure and industries. So it was $60 billion between 2015 and 2018, and in the next period is $60 billion in credits. Now, concerning the shortage of skilled labor, China is intending and have been working, like in the railway projects in Kenya, to educate the Kenyan or the local workforce to participate in these projects. These are the ladies who will run who are running the Mombasa Nairobi railway. They had courses in China and in Kenya to do these things. So the third bottleneck is the lack of infrastructure. The lack of infrastructure, which is without infrastructure you cannot get anywhere. Now, this is the plan for the African Union's the Trans-African Highway road, network to connect all the African networks. But it's more efficient to connect the African continent with railways because long-haul truck transport is not as efficient as trains. But this is one of the bottlenecks of Africa's development. So in 2014, the Prime Minister of China was in East Africa and also in West Africa and Nigeria, and he pledged that China is willing to connect all the African nations with modern railways. And immediately work started, and we had the first, one of the first and very quick project was the Djibouti-Addis Ababa railway, which is key to Ethiopia's own national development plans. This is not simply a Chinese plan, it is part of Ethiopia's national development plan, which includes industrialization and building of industrial zones. The second one was the Mombasa-Nairobi railway, which was also accomplished in record time, but also it's part of the East African master plan of transport, which will connect all the East African nations, but also with the subset of the Great Lake nations, which are landlocked. We had also the Angola, Zambia, Tanzania railway, which upgrade and connection, which also was done in record time. You already in Nigeria have massive projects for railway, both in cooperation with China, but also with other countries. Other things we can do in Africa is to connect Africa's rivers and lakes to use them for transport, which is quite possible by building canals and connecting the rivers and the lakes through artificial canals, as the Europeans did with the Rhine-Main connection and the Donau, the Danube River. One of the projects is central project is the Transaqua, which is intended to bring water to replenish Lake Chad through building a canal from the Congo, bringing water, but that canal can also be used for as a transport, for river transport in that part of the Great Lakes region. So 2 years ago, my colleagues were in Nigeria, in Abuja, where the Lake Chad Commission actually accepted this proposal as a policy, and a Chinese and Italian company signed a memorandum of understanding to work on the feasibility study of this project. Now, when I come to the final part of is what I call the Sputnik Effect. When the Russians sent their first spaceship into space and the satellite, the Sputnik, that motivated the United States to accelerate its space program as in a competitive fashion. Now, that kind of competition is quite positive, and therefore, because China cannot do all the work needed in Africa, we need to motivate nations in Europe and the United States to participate in the infrastructure projects in Africa. I take this example from Egypt because last September, the Egyptian Transport Ministry announced that a Chinese-Egyptian consortium won the bid to build a high-speed railway in Egypt. But then, just in January, we heard that the German Siemens had come forward because their previous bids were rejected because the Chinese were cheaper and more efficient and quick. The Siemens renegotiated its bid and offered a cheaper, faster contract, including employing Egyptian local companies in the project. So now the Siemens will do the project instead of the Chinese, but that kind of competition is helpful for the nations of Africa. So we are not advocating only that China should be involved. We advocate that all nations should be involved in the Belt and Road and in the development in Africa. Now, in conclusion, what I think is important, and Mr. Jide Ehizil mentioned, is what do we intend with the railways? Because the railways are not simply taking a container or a shipment from point A to point B, from Ibadan to Lagos. The real purpose of this kind of infrastructure is to create what the late American economist Lyndon LaRouche and my own teacher calls or developed as the development corridor, where you have railways as the backbone for the development corridor, which extends 100 kilometers on each side, but it also includes water canals, water transfer, power transfer, oil and gas pipelines, but also building industrial and agricultural projects around these infrastructure. So the local natural resources, human resources in these areas between A and B can be developed and augmented, and value is added to whatever moves from point A to point B. So that should be the purpose of the development of the railways in Africa. So these will be like the blood vessels in the body. They carry nutrition to all the different parts and organs of the body, so everybody is activated. So in conclusion, I think that Africa has a bright future ahead. It could become the workshop of the world and the breadbasket of the world too. The 1.3 billion people who are projected to reach 3 billion people of mostly young Africans in 2050 hold the key to the future. The only thing they need is the tools of progress, and emphatically the infrastructure, both this hard infrastructure, but also the soft infrastructure, which is education and healthcare.
Thank you very much.
Therefore, I don't think, I just have 1 minute left. I'm optimistic that Africa is leading towards a bright future, and the railways will be a way towards integrating Africa's peoples and their dreams. I don't think this is an exaggeration. It's not far-fetched. It's quite possible and practical. I have some ideas, of course, about how Africa and Nigeria can finance its own infrastructure development autonomously, but we can leave that for the discussion period or to another occasion. So thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Askari. Thank you very much for that detailed overview. You have given us a bigger picture, a world view, and how it affects Nigeria in terms of Chinese involvement. 80% of our railway project in Nigeria is financed through the Chinese. So your presentation is key, as it gives us a global perspective on, and it will also generate discussions, because many of our members here will raise questions. They are afraid of debt trap. We are getting so much money from China and all those. When we come to this discussion level, I think we will take it up. Now, the last paper is that of Mr. Banjo, Barrister Banjo from UK, is to speak on the issue of leadership. We've been talking about the progress made in the Nigerian railway sector and some of the challenges we are facing. But Mr. Banjo's paper will deal with issue of personnel, issue of leading well to ensure that we have effective implementation of the National Railway Master Plan. Mr. Banjo from UK, you're online?
Yes, I am online. Can people see me? Good
yes,
afternoon.
We are seeing you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here today to talk about railways in Nigeria. I'm, of course, a Nigerian, and I love Nigerian railway development. My presentation will be on the screen shortly, and I have to make some adjustments. Is it on the screen now?
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, it's on now.
Great. So because this has been hosted by a Chamber of Commerce, and these are business people who want to understand how the railways work and how they can get involved and make the best of it, I tilted the focus a little bit. And the focus is basically how to build a resilient railway for all time. And in doing that, I kind of looked at the 6 issues, the 7 of them that have been raised as areas of concern by the Chamber. And the approach I've taken is to look at to affirm the case that railway investment is a good thing for Nigeria, and to highlight the constraints and the progress made so far, and then highlight the sustainable collaboration as key to the issues raised in the seminar by the Chamber, and then to highlight the elements of railway delivery that can help to build resilience. And that's where we talk about building the capability for people to lead and to deliver, so that sustainable railways can be built in Nigeria. So here I'm kind of highlighting the question: is it worth the trouble investing in railways in Nigeria? Thinking about the sustainability of current financing plans and all those issues, the fear of the debt trap, and things like that. So I've come to the kind of conclusion that yes, it is worth it. And it is worth it because, of course, there are a lot of local and global issues around why railways are a good thing for development. Some of them highlighted there, which are economic, social, and environmental issues, which require that Nigeria has no choice but to invest in railways for the variety of reasons that are shown on the screen. Of course, we know about the concern about the climate and the emissions, and of course, the need to reduce poverty and to create an inclusive society. So that's the kind of headline things why it is worth it. So going forward from that is to now say, concerning the Chamber about the issues about financing and the debt trap, is to ask the question, can we afford it? And the question I say is that is the wrong question to ask, because the real question actually is, are we ready to build and run efficient railways? And I think going from the antecedents for many years now, especially since the promulgation of the 25-year railway strategy, it's clear that there is a desire for us to build and run efficient railways, because the partnering we're having now with China in particular, showing that we are determined to build efficient railways. The other part, of course, is whether we're ready to run them efficiently, which I'll come back to later on, as a proof that we are actually ready. Let me just maximize my screen. To do that, there are, of course, been initiatives in place already, the 5-year income tax relief for rail infrastructure investment. So government is aware and prepared to put it in place, incentives for investors. Now, on the headline is to say that it's a viable sector to invest in as commercial people, as a chamber is interested in. And I think these headline figures really show an estimated, this is 2013 figures, 50 to 60 million tons of freight available to move on the railways. And these are the kind of things that will help to justify investment by business people. Now, let's look at other aspects of sustainability, which one of the headline figures about sustainable financing, sustainable operation of railways is that the public are waiting. There's a high public support, and I've given a green flag there. There's high public support for railways to come and take their place in Nigeria, as they used to be in Nigeria many, many years ago. So, and I've highlighted a green bulb there, just to show from my own experience of working with London Underground, that 6 months after the Jubilee Line extension was put in place, within 6 months, the extension reached full capacity. And then we had to go and do a 7th-car project to enlarge the capacity of that branch of the line. And notably, even during COVID-19 restrictions, the Jubilee Line remains busy up to now. That exactly is a narration that when the railways become available for Nigerians to use as commuters, as travelers, it will reach such capacity that we will be forced to really think creatively of improving services. And we're going to come to the point later on where we need to start thinking about reconfiguring this sector and how we can allow other people to invest in railways and build railways everywhere across the country, so that we can take care of the 400 million people who will be showing up in about 30 years' time. So that is a justification for that. So I'm going backwards. Okay. So on the headline, I've kind of highlighted very quickly here. We have some green flags and amber flags about where we are now with railway investment in Nigeria and the delivery we have. Thankfully, we have good leadership in terms of at the national level. There is a good awareness now, and that we have to do something about railways, and we're taking the right steps. There is a policy lacuna in many aspects where things need to change, and therefore that's a red flag for investors. Rolling stock, we're getting brand new kits, so there's a dissemination that we're not going to be buying old stuff. So we're in the right place. Route planning, of course, relates to the railway master plan, the availability of flexibility and creativity, as Jide has referred to, about how do you encompass railways, allow railways to fly. So let me move to the next one. I'm not going backwards again. I am. So these are kind of elements of the what's been going on. It's a disjointed case. It's a disjointed situation in within the policy framework. There are different kind of organizations. There's no coordination between the governments, between agencies, and that needs to be addressed at the highest level possible with collaboration between the states and even the local governments and private individuals and private entities. So what are we going to do about the situation? We need to start thinking creatively. I know that in November or December, there was a move by, I think, a rep, Mr. Benson, for an amendment to the schedule. And we need to address the issue about the concurrent list and devolve powers for railways across the country, from the federal government to the state governments, even local governments, because all we need is the creative leadership to be able to handle these issues. So without going too much into detail about that, I think the headline issue had been mentioned earlier by other presenters. So again, this is about intermodality. Railways, when we build the railways, are we thinking about other connections? Are we thinking about what we can do to offer the community? How we can maximize value out of the railway locations so that we can get more out of our investment? Then the whole idea of what I'm talking about is the stakeholder value chain, that these 7 issues can be addressed within a framework where the value chain that is within the mission or the vision for the investor is understanding that resilience has to be a key factor in determining what kind of stakeholder mix that you have and how you use your people to deliver value, so that it's a worthwhile investment, it's an investable project. And I got about 2 examples of what can be done. In terms of financing the business for the railways, But I'm thinking, where can you find collaborators who have a common interest that can drive value out of it? I mean, I was doing the numbers yesterday. About 700 people died in tanker explosions between 2008 and 2015. It happened last week again, in Lagos, week before. These are stakeholders who have a vested interest that the railway investors can partner with to find a common way in which they can maximize value from investment. Then, of course, the big issue, again, I go back to London and I say, TfL, that is London Underground, Transport for London, have just got approval to build 850 flats at Acton Town. Now, there's no reason why a railway investor cannot capture land, use land value capture, and partnering with house builders and developers to help Nigeria to deliver that deficit of 17 million homes. And these are all part of understanding that the master plan with the railways across Nigeria has to fit into different kind of objectives and maximize the value of the tracks on the tracks on the trains. So quickly, again, I look at the last mile value capture. We're looking at supply chains, we're looking at big retail, we're looking at the community, just as Jide referred to the community rail, and how the railway investment can drive and bring together these disparate forces so that you're having a holistic approach rather than just putting wheels on the track bed. Because as we all know, the railway is not an engineer's playset. It's just not about putting wheels down. It's something that is inclusive and should give value. So then we come to that point where we say empty trains don't make money, and you can't pay back investors if you run empty trains, either for passengers or for freight. So if that is the case, the important thing is you're going to go back to the bottom line as you're designing your rail strategy and your investable project, the business case. You need to realize that these three elements, intensity of use, quality of service, and safety, are critical to what you're going to have to be delivering or offering for investment. And how do you deliver these three elements? You deliver them by having, at the end of your strategy, a good customer experience. And this kind of diagram captures the relationship between your stakeholders and your people and all the KPIs and standards and behaviors that are required to you to go to the front line of the delivery, the train driver, the conductor, the signaler, the station manager, who are the ones that are going to give the value to the customer in the depots, and you understand that, make that chemistry. So I had an observation that I made from looking at this diagram, and it's in terms of, again, how we look at the stakeholder value chain. I just noticed, you can see on the train at Regaza, you can see there's a gap between the train and the platform. On the other side, it's a level crossing. When you're thinking about the value proposition, the customer experience, you're looking at reliability of the service, you're looking at the customer experience, accessibility, social capital, you realize that from design to delivery, there's something that has not worked quite well. And we need to be thinking more in terms of this kind of issue so that we don't have to be doing corrective work after we deliver such a big project. So let me go back to, so again, this is the indication of the incident of November 20 last year, where the and this is what happened. So we don't want to have to build a railway. We're delivering a railway. We open money. We need to run a service, and we're having customer experience of that type. We're thinking about how people are going to be working and running.
Okay.
We're going to move quickly to the end. I'm at the end of it now. So the point is that your people that drive the railway to stop.
Please mute your mic if you are not talking.
So it's the people that drive the railway from the leadership. So the people that are investing in the business, the leaders in the organization to the front line, we need to start building the capacity at all levels to make sure that every person, from the CEO to the man on the gate, they are working to the same agenda to justify the investment by the government in the railways. So, and again, let me go back. I think I've almost finished now. So, two things: sustainability. These are the key elements that the investors who are thinking of doing railway investment to be thinking about. Have you defined the characteristics of a sustainable business for customers and stakeholders? Do your strategy and operations align with value chain in front? So it's this kind of mix that takes serious thinking. So we'll go back to the end now, to the same picture, the stakeholder value chain. When you look at those 6 elements that we're concerned about today, I believe that we look at resilience from the beginning. We look at our stakeholder mix. Are our stakeholders going to help us to deliver a resilient railway? And if they can, we agree a value chain that helps the front line to use a framework that delivers a surplus at the end of the day. So the Nigerian people, as I said, they are waiting for a world-class railway, and I believe it can be done. We're on the right journey, and I think that with the best of everything we can, in a few years' time, we will have a railway in Nigeria that will be world-class by every standard. So thanks very much to the AACCI, Mr. President, and Mr. Olawale Rashid for inviting me to have my say on this webinar. It's a very exciting time for railways in Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Banjo. That presentation is so detailed and it covers many areas. We are particularly interested in your
Yeah, mute, Mr. Rashid.
presentation, because you address members of the we can come in terms of investment and of policy alongside all other presentation. Now, Mr. President, sir, I just spoke with the minister now.
Yes.
He's presently on his way to the State House. He
to do what?
To the State House.
Okay.
They called him for a review over Kano Maradi Railway.
Yes.
He sent his speech. He has already sent his speech to me that he's still there, that if he's able to meet us, he will come and read the speech. But if he's not able to, we should circulate the speech. But before we go to that, I seek your permission to have contributions from members of this panel. There are many people from Nigerians, from UK, US, who have been making comments so that we have general discussion.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Rashid, go ahead. Gosh.
Maybe Mr. President, we start. If you have any questions. Yeah,
No,
members
go
of
on.
the audience, we have a question from developing 2022 to 20. Okay.
Yeah, I listened to all the talks, and honestly, I've been able to pick a lot of information that is very interesting. And I wish the minister were here to listen to all what was been said about the discussions we are having on the railway lines. But I want to ask, the minister did not suggest to send a representative?
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
The minister, did he not send a representative?
No, he said he was to come himself. And that is why he was on his way joining us in his office before he received the call.
Okay, but you say he's going to the villa now.
He's going to join us later.
I doubt if you will be able to join us. So what you do is just continue. Let's continue.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. President. Sir, if we have questions and contribution, Mr. Mukoro from US.
Yes, I am. I'm here.
Yes, let's hear your contribution.
Okay, just trying to make sure that you can see me.
Yes.
Okay.
By the way, Mr. Mukoro is the CEO of Reliance Rail International, US. You have the floor.
Okay. So my contribution is pretty straightforward. I as opposed to presenting presenting to the panel, I got a series of questions that came from people in the industry who are very interested in finding out what the plan is for Nigeria. Can we actually afford the infrastructure that we're building? And so I wanted I wanted to address some of the questions that I received privately. And one of the key questions, so one of the key questions was, can we afford this money that we're spending on rail infrastructure? And I'll give you some examples by talking about my my experience globally. So I've been fortunate, along with some of the members who have dialed in, to have worked on projects globally. So we worked on projects in Australia, in the US, in the Middle East, and the model that Nigeria has is predominantly focused, and should be predominantly focused on freight. And so if Nigeria focuses on freight, then the answer to that question is yes, we can afford to pay the several $billion tag for what we're about to spend. And I'll give you an example. In Australia, I was fortunate to have been involved in one of the largest privately financed port minor rail projects in the world. That project is a project called Roy Hill. Roy Hill was a $10.2 billion project to build a port, mine, and rail line from Western Australia, a point in Western Australia, all the way through to the port of to Port Hedland. It was 340 kilometers of mainline railway, and the total rail built was about 370. So it included the sidings, the rail within the port. And so what we built was a brand new port at Port Hedland, the port marine facilities, as I said, a 370 kilometer rail line, a small airport, and a mine processing plant. The total cost, as I said, was $10.2 billion. The partners, which included a lady called Gina Reinhardt, POSCO, STX, and China Steel, and one other group, all as partners had about $3 billion of their own. So we were able to raise $7.2 billion. This is around 2012. So we raised this money for one rail line, one mine with a 17-year mine life. We were able to bring that rail line up to 55 million gross tons per annum, and that loan is fully paid off as of today. This project, kicked off around 2012. So that gives you an understanding of whether we can afford it or not. So we're talking about one mine with one mine life, no other, nothing else running on the railway, and we were able to pay off that loan. So my answer, the question is, in Nigeria, can we do the same thing? Absolutely. There needs to be coordination, in my view, with the Ministry of Mines, and we need to focus predominantly on freight. Now, passenger infrastructure will come, and we can subsidize the passenger infrastructure with what we are gaining from freight. And so the focus, in answer to the question, the focus, in my view, on Nigerian railroad infrastructure should predominantly be on freight. And if that happens, then yes, we can afford the several $billion that's required to develop what we're about to develop in Nigeria. Now, to keep this a bit more interesting, I'd like it to be interactive. So there are a few people, and there are several questions I received, and I don't want to address them without people understanding or being able to contribute to the discussion. So I'd like to open the floor, if I can, for people to ask direct questions, and so that we can address their questions and concerns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
so,
before you go, will you want to answer this problem of fear about debt trap? We're getting too much loan and all those. That's a major issue.
Absolutely. I would love to. I would love to address that concern. So I'll give you an example for where we are with Nigeria. So in Nigeria, we have proven mineral reserves that are untapped or very likely tapped. And I'll give you an example. So if you go to Itakbe, for example, at Itakbe, we built a line from Itakbe to Warri back in the 80s. And the vision at the time was for us to be able to do two things: supply the local steel industry with iron ore directly from Itakbe, and to be able to get iron ore to a port so that we can export it. How much iron ore roughly do we have in Nigeria? And if you look at Itakbe, specifically at Itakbe, we have proven reserves of in excess of 3 trillion tons. And that's trillion with a T. 3 trillion tons of untapped iron ore in Itakbe. Developing a mine processing plant, in my opinion, to process some of this iron ore to get it ready for what we call DSO, direct ship ore, should be a focus, which would require coordination between the Ministry of Mines and Minerals and the Transport Ministry. We can supply the local market, in my view, as well as export iron ore. The next question will be, is the grade of ore in Itakbe high enough quality to export? And the answer to that is yes. And I'll give you an example. So in Australia, there's a group called FMG, Fortescue Metal Group, and they have an iron ore deposit with a lower grade than usual. So what they do is they tend to process the ore, blend it with a higher grade ore, and then convert it to DSO and ship it out of the country. So can we do it in Nigeria? Absolutely. Does it require a heavy investment? Absolutely. And with the coordination between the Ministry of Mines and Minerals and the railway, I believe firmly that even though it would cost us billions of dollars to do, it has been done in the past and it can be done in Nigeria.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
I can see Mr. Rotimi, the GM for Kaduna Dry Port, raising his hand. Mr. Rotimi. Mr. Raim.
If not, I have a comment on what was discussed.
Okay. Go ahead, that's correct.
Yeah, no, thank you, Rashid. You raised a number of questions yourself, but then in the discussion, other questions came on the question of the debt trap. If what the loans China, for example, is extending to African countries or Asian countries is the debt trap or not. We have proven in our research, and now it's coming more and more, even in British and American think tanks, that there is no real basis for the debt trap. Now, there are there's one type of debt trap which Africa, South America, and Asia have been entangled in, is that they have, because of the consequent financial and economic crisis, they have to borrow money to cover deficit in the budget or borrow money to pay old debt. So the debt accumulates. That's a debt trap. But when you take credit to build a productive project, a port, an industry, a railway, which can increase the productivity of your economy and your society, that's not a trap. This is not a liability. You have an asset. The railway built is an asset. It's not a liability. What is a liability is if you borrow money on a short term to pay old term debt. That's a debt trap. And we have looked at every case mentioned in Pakistan or in Sri Lanka. It turns out that the debt trap was set by international financial systems, not by China. The other thing is that the question of financing infrastructure, nations have to find ways of autonomously financing these. Mr. Marcus just said some brilliant things, but I think that Africa should move away from exporting raw materials into using the raw materials for industrial internal development. Yes, you can export part of it, but you should build infrastructure, because without electricity, without power, without transport, without water, you cannot build industries. So the priority is to build the infrastructure as soon as possible. Now, one idea is to have national development banks in each African country, which can use, as I give you an example, that there are many examples in history. The United States did it with the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. The Germans did it with the Kreditanstalt für Wiederaufbau during the Marshall Plan. South Koreans did it. They create a national bank for development, which is creating credit internally for infrastructure projects. But it can be guaranteed by an outside force. That's another issue. But another way is you can create credit based on the natural wealth you have. Was just recent one example from Iraq, my native country. Iraq and China signed an agreement whereby it's called the oil for reconstruction in the media, that Iraq takes a small portion of its exports of oil, which is about 4% of the daily export of oil to China. And that money, which China pays, will be put into a fund to finance infrastructure projects in Iraq. And the Chinese banks will add 85% of that credit. So you have like a $10 billion capital, which you then use it as a leverage to issue credits for infrastructure. So Iraq will pay back these loans on a very, very long-term basis for 20 years, but using only a small portion of its exported oil. But in the meantime, Iraq can, in cooperation with China or other countries, build its own infrastructure, industry, and agriculture. So Iraq does not use its hard currency to buy food and even fuel from outside. And Iraq can use its raw oil to build petrochemical industries to add value to the raw oil it exports. So gradually you diminish dependency on exporting raw materials, because we have seen massive crises in Africa when the commodity prices dip. When the oil price collapses, Nigeria, Angola, Algeria, all these countries who are dependent on export of oil and gas, their economies enter into a real depression. So you have to avoid that by creating a credit mechanism which takes you away from dependency on raw material export. So you can use your raw materials as an asset for issuing credit. You put them in a bank, not physically, but you put your assets in a national bank and use that as a leverage to issue credit for infrastructure and industrial development.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. There is an issue that's cut across all the presentation. The national transport policy has not been approved. It's still within the legislative chambers and others. What exactly is the problem? Mr. Mukuru and others, what can we do to get the national transport policy off the ground?
So in my view, so the two things. Let me go back and address something that was raised in the discussion just before this. It's interesting that you made, the previous speaker made a point about using oil to pay for infrastructure and then repaying over a long period. So the first things first is, how do you pay your debts? A nation pays its debts by ensuring that you are importing less than you're exporting, and obviously, if that's the case, then there's a balance of trade, and you're able to pay off your debts. Nigeria's problem, as I see it, is one of we are importing an awful lot, and we're exporting very little. There's a heavy dependence on oil, and oil as a single resource. We need to diversify, in my view, and I'll take Australia as an example. Australia, if we just look at some of the top exporters of iron ore in Australia, you have BHP, who exports about 300 million gross tons per annum of iron ore. Fortescue Metal Group, 176 million gross tons of iron ore. Roy Hill, 55 million gross tons of iron ore. This is raw materials. And what I can say for a fact is that Australia barely has a steel industry. They predominantly rely on exporting raw materials. And I'm saying, why is this not happening in Nigeria? There needs to be a focus in these areas, because it helps us diversify as a nation. So sorry I didn't address your first question, but I had to address.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah. Okay. Now, sorry. So if you can provide me the question is.
The issue of national transport policy. National transport policy.
Okay. So I don't know what
I also want Mr. Banjo to also speak on this.
Okay. Start with Mr. Banjo and then I'll take over. If we can start with Mr. Banjo, I'll take over.
Mr. Banjo.
Yes, please.
Yes, the issue of national transport policy. What exactly is the problem, and what can be done to get it off the ground?
In my opinion, I think during the Babangida government in 1987, there was an attempt to try to look into a national policy on transport. And I think there was a draft policy that was enacted or formulated in 1993. And I believe that politically, considering the nature of military government, there was no, I do not see there was a determination to have a true consensus on the issues around what the policy on transport should be for the country. So, and of course, we remember 1993, the turbulence in the country. So I don't think there was really any political will to look into such long-term issues, considering the debacle around the elections and the time during the Abacha regime. I think so the influence of time, the passage of time at that period, did not allow any serious focus on such a matter. And of course, that time also witnessed the decline in the railways. So there was a general state of anomy within the transport sector, seriously. And so the best opportunity that was then given was with the inauguration of the Fourth Republic in 1999, which then immediately we saw that kind of renewed energy by the Obasanjo administration to try and find some momentum back into the railways. And that was the journey that led to the 25-year master plan. So I think when you look at the determination of the Obasanjo government and up to the present time, you see that a sustained democratic government has much more sustainable interest in developing the country. And I think we should be thankful we've managed to keep the democratic process going. And therefore, the evolution of consultation within the legislature is also quite difficult. It's quite tricky. Additionally, I think also there is an absence of the right creative thinking within the legislature. I do not think we have had enough of leadership in the National Assembly or in the states who actually fully understood the value of a transport policy nationally. So there's been a lot of flip-flopping between different kind of issues, but there's no coherence. But thankfully, I believe in the last 10 years, there's been a sustained effort now to turn the corner. So perhaps better late than never, or delayed, but to get a proper policy out that serves the needs of the 21st century. Otherwise, we'll probably still be working with the one 1993. So I think better late than never, and I expect that going forward, especially with the commitment by the legislature after the second reading of the bill to amend parts of the Constitution to devolve railways into the concurrent list. So we are actually seeing serious moves now towards a much more sustainable policy on transport. And to say I'm disappointed, yes, up to a point, but I think moving forward now, we are in a good place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. In other words, there are moves in the National Assembly. There are two bills, actually. The National Transport Policy, then the amendment to the Constitution, moving the railway matter from exclusive to concurrent. We hope this will be pursued for that. We have 10 more minutes to round up. If there's any outstanding question or contribution before I go to the Director General of our chamber, who will actually round up. Is there any further comment from anybody?
I have my hand raised.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, sir. Sorry for that. Sorry for that.
Well, in line with the issue of policy, I support Banjo's submission. We are not interested. There is a lot of competition with the road sector. It was in 1963 that a group of individuals, investors, demanded for 50% of all haulage from the north down to the south. Drove the railway development in Nigeria. Since then, the railway has not been e-served. In 1977, Nigeria, decided to, modernize the railway. So a plan was made, a complete plan, of conversion from a meter gauge, to standard gauge. That was done, and then that, resulted to the building of, the ocean terminal in Port Harcourt, that's ONE, and then the crossing of standard gauge to Ajokuta, to serve Ajokuta. But something happened politically. They decided to stop it. Now, the bridge is there, the port is there, but unused. Then they came up with, the issue of, driving the line from Ajokuta to Warri, and that is the situation we find ourselves now. So I think if Nigeria is come up now to say, okay, let us face this issue that is a crisis situation, we need to get back.
Hello, Mr. Andrew. Hello.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. Mr. Andrew.
Yes, I have just a point that is very limited. What are you asking? Is the fact that when you have a plan, so think about regulation is a key point. As I show you, I work in many also African countries. Of course, every single country is different from others. But I think that there's a clear possibility
Sorry, can other people mute themselves because there's disturbance?
Yes, please, can you mute yourself so that we listen to Professor Andrew?
Yeah.
Andrew, continue.
Yes. What is very important is that you allow the maximization of the use of the infrastructure. So when you have a new infrastructure, the real target is to increase the use of that infrastructure. Even if you go, if you have to build that Hussein told very well, but is not productive, is a problem. When it's productive, that kind of infrastructure, so start to change. What is the business model that you want to give that? So from my side, if you see many examples all around the world, we are going for opening about the competition. We are seeing the same in India right now. That is a huge country for that. You are seeing South Korea and so on. So what is very, very important that when you have a discussion, political discussion, if there's a clear target that is increasing the productivity of the system, you can go in the direction that I showed before. So there's all the time when you go at political level to try to convince the government, try to convince the politicians what is the best for the country. And the best for the country is the best use of the infrastructure that you have or that you are building. So this is a key point that many times forget, but I think is very, very important to be taken in mind when we discuss about that.
I would like to just say that I agree completely with Andreas, because the purpose of infrastructure or any economic activity should be to increase the productivity of the labor of that society. But you cannot increase the productivity of your society in industry and agriculture without having infrastructure today. So therefore, the focus on building efficient infrastructure to be able to use that infrastructure to increase productivity in the whole society, that's what gets people out of poverty and out of debt traps. Thank you very much. I'm very happy.
Yes, we have one more comment before I will call on the on our DG. Mr. Roland Lataguba is a very strong voice in the Nigerian railway sector. He's UK based. I hope you can say one or two things. Mr. Taguba.
Thank you, Rashid.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you. Continue.
Okay. Well, thank you. Sorry, I joined late. There wasn't a reminder, so I missed it. But the little I've heard so far has been very encouraging, and I can see as well that the attendance has been very significant, which shows how much passion and how much interest there is in the subject. Overall, I think we're moving finally progressively. There's still things, as have been highlighted in the conversation, that are outstanding. Things like legislation reform or legislative action, which is imperative and are things that we have been canvassing for so many years. But there is a great sense of progress right now, as you highlighted earlier, with legislation to amend the constitution in Nigeria with regards to the exclusive list. That is making progress, albeit slowly, but there is a concern that the constitutional amendment process, as always is, will get hijacked by politics and therefore amount to nothing at the end of the day. But critically are the fact that time is rushing ahead, and we still haven't made much progress on creating an independent regulator for railway. It's key. Somebody mentioned the NTC bill. I don't think that bill is going to pass. It's been with the executive for such a long time now, has gone back to the NAS and gone back to the executive, and they're sitting on it. So quite clearly, it's not going to be passed. But we need an independent regulator in railway. So if they're not going to give us an NTC, then they better give us that rail regulator. And without it, you will not get the massive investments that are potentially available to railway in Nigeria. And that is why we see government single-handedly trying to prosecute so much. But there's a limit to how much money is available to government, to the federal government, and there's a limit to what it can do with its own resources. So we're in that chicken and egg situation. We must have that regulator, otherwise you won't get the funds in. That's my final comment. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roland. I also want to announce that this webinar is the first series. We're having the second chapter where most of this presentation will be collated. And hopefully by then, the minister will be available to answer some of the questions. And before the DJ will round it up, we'll upload the minister's speech, which we are going to send to every participant, so that by the time we reconvene for the second webinar, people will actually know what he has said and how to take it up. I'll call on our technical people to upload the minister's speech, while I proceed to call on our Director General for Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Ms. Fiki Akai, to deliver the closing remarks, while thanking everybody for this active participation. DJ Ma.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Rashid, for successfully planning and anchoring this event. Thank you so much. Let me, on the behalf of the President, Dr. Mujtaba Abubakar, the ESCO, Council, and members of Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry, thank all our distinguished guests for making time out to attend this all-important webinar on assessing the railway development in Nigeria. Our special thanks goes to the Honorable Minister of Transport of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency, Right Honorable Rotimi Amechi, for his support in the planning of this webinar. Unfortunately, his busy schedule could not permit him to attend. Our special thanks goes to our speakers, Jide Ehizele, Michael Banjo, Marcus Mukoro, Andre Gurich, and Hussein Askari. We're indeed delighted to have you all participate in the first webinar organized by ACCI this year, and it was a success. Thank you very much. Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry has over the years set the pace by embarking on activities that have unlocked several doors of opportunities, which have put our people to work and also expanded businesses. Part of our mission is to contribute meaningfully to shaping policymaking and implementation in Nigeria. This webinar is of so much importance to ACCI and the business community as a whole, as we cannot do business profitably without adequate and cost-effective transportation logistics. And this was thoroughly discussed and presented in this webinar. Thank you so much to the speakers. Of special importance is this webinar in this period when Africa is commencing its implementation of the Free Continental Trade Area Agreement. The proper development of a rail network not only reduces the cost of transportation, both in terms of money and time, but also helps in the integration of various regions within the country and better understanding of neighboring countries at the international level. Nigeria's business community looks forward to continuous improvement of our railway and the entire transportation sector for the overall improvement of ease of doing business and contributing to employment and other business opportunities in the country. As we've heard today, an effective and efficient railway system is essential for Nigeria to catch up with the current industrial revolution and the surest bet to economic integration, prosperity, and development. Please indulge me to commend our team at the Policy Advocacy Center of the Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry, led by Alhaji Olawale Rashid. Mr. Rashid, thank you and your team so much for organizing this event. And thank you for so much efforts, for so much of your efforts that you channeled into organizing this event. I know we had been planning this since last year, so congratulations. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation, and I wish you a very successful and COVID-19 free 2021. Please stay safe and adhere to the preventive measures. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much. Thank you, DJ. Thank you, our people, all participants. We are grateful. Thank you. We'll get back. We'll send the report of the webinar to everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you.